I never thought I'd need to fight back against my own neighborhood, but when I saw that blinking red light outside my bedroom window, I knew they'd crossed a line. The HOA said the new security cameras were for community safety, but they weren't pointed at the streets. They were pointed straight into my home. Every move I made, every time I stepped onto my porch, that little red eye followed me, I complained. They ignored me. I covered my windows. They fined me. But what they didn't know was that I was recording them too, and soon their cameras would become my weapon. I bought this house for peace, not for perfection. The neighborhood was clean, quiet, and wrapped in that artificial calm that every homeowners association tries to sell. Trimmed lawns, matching mailboxes, the same color fences like someone copy-pasted the world in beige. I didn't mind the rules at first. I just wanted privacy, a bit of space to breathe. That changed when she moved in. Karen Bishop, mid-40s, sharp blonde bob, always in bright blazers that screamed for attention. The moment she became HOA president, things changed overnight. She said she wanted order. What she meant was control. It started small. Warning letters about my grass being uneven, a note about my garbage bins not being symmetrical. I laughed it off. But then, one morning, I noticed a black dome glinting under the streetlight at the end of my driveway. A camera. At first, I thought maybe a neighbor had installed it for security. But when I checked the HOA bulletin online, I found a notice I hadn't seen before. New Community Surveillance Program. Approved by the HOA board. Mandatory participation. I called the number listed, Karen answered. Oh, hi, Liam, she said, voice dripping with fake cheer. Don't worry, the cameras are for everyone's safety. You have nothing to hide, do you? The tone underneath that last line wasn't a question. It was a warning. I wanted to believe it wasn't personal. But that changed when I saw where they'd placed one of the cameras, mounted right on the lamppost outside my window, angled straight toward my living room. It didn't look like safety. It looked like surveillance. I tried to reason with them, sent an email citing privacy laws. The next morning, a violation letter was taped to my door. Tampering with HOA equipment. They fined me $200 for obstruction of community operations. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about power. That night I stood in my yard looking up at the red blinking light. It blinked like a heartbeat, steady and patient, almost mocking. I could feel Karen's smug satisfaction even from across the street, but I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I went back inside, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. If they wanted to watch me, they'd better hope I never started watching back. The next few days, I tried to ignore it. Pretend it wasn't happening. Pretend that I didn't feel that constant invisible stare. But you can't really ignore something that watches you back. Every morning when I stepped out to grab my mail, I'd see that black dome glinting in the corner of my eye. When I walked my dog, I could feel its tiny lens pivoting, tracking movement. Soon there were 2 cameras. Then 3, then 6. The HOA newsletter called it a state-of-the-art safety initiative. But safety for whom? The breaking point came when I was in my garage one Saturday working on my car. I had music playing, the door halfway open for air. A few hours later, I got a notice from the HOA. Noise violation recorded at 3:42 p.m. They sent a screenshot from the footage as proof. That's when I realized they weren't just monitoring, they were archiving. Marched to the next HOA meeting, Karen sat at the head of the folding table like she owned the place. Her floral blazer looked almost weaponized. Around her, the board nodded like obedient drones, the same neighbors who used to wave at me when I walked by. Karen, I said, dropping the letter onto the table, you can't record people on private property. You're breaking surveillance laws. She smiled that politician's smile, the one that never reaches the eyes. Oh, Liam, we're not recording you, she said sweetly. We're recording the community environment. Don't you feel safer knowing we can see everything? I laughed. Everything? That includes my garage. Then close your garage, she snapped, the politeness vanishing. Maybe if everyone followed the rules, we wouldn't need cameras. There it was, the truth. This wasn't about safety. It was about obedience. The other members shifted awkwardly, pretending to agree. One of them, An older man named Rick leaned in and whispered, "Drop it, Liam. She'll make your life hell." I looked at him, then back at her. Maybe she already has. When I got home, another letter was waiting on my porch. Fine. $500. Disruptive conduct at HOA meeting. That night, as I sat on my porch steps, I noticed something new. A camera mounted at the community entrance, rotating automatically, sweeping across lawns like a lighthouse beam. Karen's doing, no doubt. But this time, something inside me shifted. If they wanted to record everything, fine. I'd make sure they recorded themselves doing it. I started researching the brand of camera they used. Same model across the neighborhood. Cloud-based storage, weak encryption, remote admin access. A system designed to keep residents out of their own data. But that also meant if someone knew what they were doing, it could be accessed, and I knew what I was doing. That night, I opened my laptop again. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, calm. I logged into a new account I'd set up quietly the week before, and I started watching. This time, the eyes of the neighborhood were mine. The next few nights blurred together. My routine became mechanical. Wake up, go to work, pretend everything's normal, then come home and slip back into my real life, digital reconnaissance. By now, I knew the camera system inside out. The brand was VisiSure 360, a mid-range commercial setup. Their cloud portal had sloppy security. Whoever set it up must have checked every default box without reading the fine print. A simple credential stuffing attack was enough to open a few doors. I didn't touch anything illegal, not yet. I just looked around. At first, it was simple curiosity. Camera feeds labeled by address, with timestamps and recording logs. But the deeper I went, the more I noticed something wrong. One folder stood out: Priority Access, HOA Board Only. Inside it were subfolders named after residents, including mine. Each folder contained footage organized by date, not general footage, specific surveillance. My folder had clips from my garage, backyard, and even moments through my window blinds when the lighting hit wrong. My stomach twisted. They weren't monitoring the neighborhood. They were spying on individuals, and judging by the other names listed, Rick. A few families who'd opposed recent fines. They were targeting anyone who questioned Karen. That night, I sat in my darkened living room staring at my laptop screen. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the computer fan. I opened another folder marked Board Meetings. To my surprise, these weren't official records. They were recordings, likely from the same hidden surveillance. The first file opened with Karen's voice, sharp and cold. "We can't let residents dictate what's acceptable. The board must maintain authority," another voice. "But Liam's right, Karen. Those cameras are a gray area. Then make him an example. Click. Video off." My pulse was pounding. So that's how she operated, through intimidation and control. Every neighbor too scared to resist, every complaint silenced under the weight of fines and policy enforcement. But I wasn't scared anymore. I backed up the recordings, encrypted them, and made several copies. Then I went back into the system. Not to steal, not to destroy, but to mirror. I rerouted the live feeds through a local proxy, one only I could see. Every move Karen made, every HOA meeting in that little clubhouse, every whispered conversation at her porch, I had access. The same way they'd watched me, I was watching them. One night, around midnight, I saw her outside her house through the front gate cam. She was talking to a man in a dark suit, not a resident. They exchanged envelopes. She looked over her shoulder twice. That moment, something clicked. This wasn't just HOA drama. This was a racket. She wasn't enforcing order, and she was profiting from it. Inflated maintenance invoices, selective fines, and security expenses billed to residents. The cameras were her leverage. The next morning, I watched her at the community entrance, smiling and waving as joggers passed. No one suspected a thing, but I did. And I finally had proof. Still, I knew confronting her directly would be suicide. She controlled the board, the budget, and the narrative. So I decided to do what she feared most: expose her publicly. But before I made any move, I wanted one last piece of evidence, something that would make denial impossible. That meant I'd have to go deeper into her digital fortress. to where the financial records lived. For the first time, I smiled while looking at those cameras. They weren't watching me anymore. They were working for me. The morning after my discovery, I woke up feeling different. Not anxious, not angry. Focused. For weeks, I'd been living under Karen's invisible leash, waiting for the next violation notice or fine. But now, I had control of the leash, and I intended to use it. From my laptop, I started tracking patterns. Every camera, every timestamp, every route the HOA security cart took around the block. I learned when Karen left her house, when she met board members, even when she turned off her porch light. The cameras were her power and her downfall. She held her usual inspection walk every Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Clipboard in hand, she'd stroll past driveways, peering at everyone's lawns like a queen reviewing her soldiers. That day, I was ready. When she reached my driveway, I opened the feed from the gate camera on my phone. There she was, Karen in her trademark pastel blazer, pointing at my pickup like it was a personal insult. She raised her phone, snapped photos, and muttered something into her Bluetooth earpiece. Perfect. I let her finish, then uploaded a short video clip to my private channel. It showed her taking pictures of my property, zoomed in, annotated, time-stamped, with a caption, "When HOA presidents turn into stalkers." I didn't post it publicly yet, but the feeling of having that leverage, it was intoxicating. Over the next few days, I collected more. Recordings of her gossiping with other board members. Clips of her mocking residents she fined. At one point, she said on camera, "If they can't afford to follow HOA rules, they shouldn't live here." That one sentence was pure gold. It showed who she truly was. Then came the real turning point. While tracing her late-night meetings, I found a feed showing her inside the community clubhouse, the heart of the HOA. She was sitting at a desk with 3 men, contractors by the look of them, signing papers and exchanging envelopes. Through the microphone channel, faint words slipped through. 20% kickback like last time? My jaw tightened. I hit record. Later that night, I zoomed in on the documents using the feed's high-resolution setting. Maintenance contracts, all paid from community funds, but the bank routing numbers led somewhere else. Her own company. She wasn't enforcing HOA policy. She was stealing from her neighbors. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I had everything. The surveillance logs, the voice recordings, the money trail, all captured by her own system. Still, I didn't rush. I needed to break her publicly, not privately. A slow collapse, one she couldn't wriggle out of. So I began a subtle campaign, a few anonymous emails sent from encrypted accounts to residents who'd been fined unfairly. I included short clips, Karen belittling them in meetings, mocking their homes. I sent another to the HOA treasurer with evidence of the false invoices. I didn't include my name. I just signed them, from someone who knows the truth. By the weekend, the community was buzzing. People whispered near mailboxes, stared longer at Karen's house, and started skipping board meetings. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Karen's smugness began to crack. I saw it on the feeds, her pacing, her anxious phone calls, her sudden decision to disable 2 of the cameras. But what she didn't realize was, she couldn't disable me. I'd already cloned the system. That Sunday morning, she stopped by my driveway again, her usual confidence gone. "Liam," she started, forcing a smile, "we seem to have misunderstandings. Perhaps we should talk." I leaned against my truck and simply said, "Smile for the cameras, Karen." Her expression froze. She knew. Somehow she knew I knew, and for the first time since I'd moved here, she turned and walked away. By Monday morning, the neighborhood's calm suburban rhythm had been replaced with whispers and suspicion. You could feel it in the air. The quiet tension between neighbors who once waved at each other now sharing uneasy glances. And Karen? She was unraveling. From my office, I watched her march down the sidewalk in her stiff pastel suit, knocking on doors like a politician begging for votes. Some residents let her in. Most didn't. Others stood outside with arms crossed, shaking their heads as she spoke. The more she talked, the more isolated she became. But a cornered HOA president is a dangerous creature. By that afternoon, I got my first taste of retaliation. A certified letter from the HOA slid into my mailbox. Notice of non-compliance. Apparently, my truck's reflective surface violated the community's visual uniformity clause. I almost laughed. I'd never seen a clause like that before, and when I checked the HOA bylaws, it didn't exist. She was making up rules now. The next morning, my mailbox was tagged with an orange sticker. Pending fine, $200. The morning after that, she had a tow warning sign planted in front of my driveway. It was her message. She knew someone was exposing her, and she'd decided I was suspect number one. That night, I turned on my cloned feed and watched. Inside her house, the lights flickered as she paced across the living room. Her husband sat slumped on the couch, looking exhausted while she waved papers in the air. The feed's microphone picked up just enough to hear fragments. Someone hacked the cameras. Then how do they have your signature, Karen? Don't question me, Peter. You think I don't know how this works? Her voice cracked. She was terrified, not of me, but of exposure. That meant I was close, but Karen wasn't stupid. The next morning, my cloned feed showed that she'd brought in outside help. A private security contractor, the kind with tactical polos and mirrored sunglasses. They started reinstalling routers and replacing cameras across the neighborhood. What they didn't know was that they were replacing the wrong ones. My access wasn't through her routers anymore. It was through the DVR in the clubhouse, the system hub she never thought to check. When they were done, Karen strutted around the cul-de-sac like she'd just reclaimed her empire. She even had the nerve to wave at me while I was washing my truck. "We've upgraded security," she called out smugly. I smiled back. "Good, you'll need it." Her smirk faltered for just a second. That's all I needed. That evening I did what she'd never expect. I turned the cameras on myself. I staged a scene. Me walking calmly to the clubhouse after hours, unlocking the door with my access card, and leaving a sealed envelope on the front desk. Inside, it was a printed photo, her sitting with those contractors and their envelopes of cash. Then I walked out and made sure the camera caught every step. The next day, the envelope was gone. But the whispers grew louder. At the morning HOA gathering, Karen's voice trembled as she tried to restore order. "The HOA board is aware of misinformation being spread," she said, her smile stretched thin. "Everything is under control." It wasn't. Because while she spoke, I sent every homeowner an anonymous email with one simple subject line. "Want to see where your HOA fees go?" Attached was a single video, her signature, her laugh, her deal. Within hours, the neighborhood chat groups exploded. Homeowners flooded her inbox. Board members quit. The local news van was parked by the gate before sunset. Karen didn't know it yet, but I'd turned her own surveillance system into her public confession. And the best part? She'd installed every camera herself. By the next morning, the neighborhood was chaos. You could hear it. Doors slamming, voices raised, phones ringing nonstop. Karen's empire had started crumbling faster than she could hold it together. Half the board had resigned overnight, and homeowners were demanding refunds for misappropriated funds. The HOA group chat, usually filled with lawn care reminders, was now a war zone. But Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. She showed up at my door that afternoon, clipboard clutched like a weapon, her face tight and pale. "You think this is funny?" she hissed. "You're behind this!" I leaned against the doorframe, calm as ever. "Behind what exactly?" Her eyes narrowed. "The footage, the rumors. Don't play innocent with me, Mr. Carter. I'll have you in court for defamation." I smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'll see you there." She stormed off, muttering threats, and I closed the door behind her. My pulse was steady. It was almost over. The hearing was scheduled just 2 weeks later. HOA versus Liam Carter. They tried to paint me as a hacker, an infiltrator, a neighbor-turned-digital terrorist. But what they didn't know, what Karen never understood, was that I'd never broken into anything illegally. Every camera I accessed, every file I viewed, came through systems connected to my own property lines, and more importantly, I had proof. The courtroom was packed that day. Neighbors, reporters, even the county building inspector. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table in her tailored lavender suit, tapping her manicured nails against a binder stuffed with papers. Her lawyer, a stiff man with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned over to whisper something, and she nodded like she still had a chance. When the judge entered, the room went silent. The HOA's attorney went first, painting a picture of me as a malicious troublemaker. They presented photos of supposed illegal surveillance, grainy screenshots from neighborhood cameras. Then Karen took the stand. Her voice quivered just enough to sound fragile. "He violated my privacy," she said, staring directly at me. "He manipulated my system to frame me." I waited, calm, letting her talk. Then my lawyer stood. "Your Honor," he said evenly, "we have a video that contradicts Ms. Bishop's claims." Karen's head snapped toward him. "What video?" The judge nodded. "Play it." The lights dimmed slightly as the screen came to life, footage straight from her own cameras. First clip, Karen counting cash and handing envelopes to a contractor. Second, Karen signing a backdated approval form. Third, Karen laughing with the words, "They'll never check the budget anyway." The courtroom was dead silent. You could hear someone gasp in the back row. Then came the final clip, time-stamped, clear as day, showing Karen personally ordering new cameras to keep tabs on certain residents. The irony was perfect. When the screen faded to black, the judge leaned forward. "Ms. Bishop, can you explain this?" Karen stammered. That's fabricated. It's been edited." The judge raised an eyebrow. "From your own system?" Her face drained of color. It was over. The HOA's attorney quietly requested a recess. The board members sitting behind Karen began whispering among themselves, sliding further down their chairs. When court resumed, my lawyer delivered the final blow, a printed log from the HOA's security contractor, listing my property as one of the authorized access points for the neighborhood system. Legally speaking, I had every right to view those feeds. The judge didn't even take long. "Case dismissed," he said, voice firm. "And given the evidence of mismanagement, I'm ordering a full audit of the HOA." Karen's pen fell from her hand. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, microphones extended, and I gave them the only statement I needed. "Sometimes," I said, "the best way to fight surveillance is to turn it back on the people watching you." That night, I watched the neighborhood from my porch, quiet once again. The cameras were gone, the HOA office shuttered, and Karen's house had a for sale sign on the lawn. For the first time in months, the cul-de-sac was peaceful, and it wasn't because of the rules. It was because the people finally saw who had been watching them all along. It's strange how quiet peace can feel after months of chaos. For weeks, my neighborhood had been a battleground of gossip, suspicion, and power. Now the only sounds were sprinklers, birds, and the occasional hum of a passing car. Karen's house sat dark at the end of the cul-de-sac. Curtains drawn tight, a faint for sale sign crooked on the front lawn. Rumor had it she'd moved in with her sister across town, until things cooled down. The HOA office, once her personal throne, stood empty, its sign removed. Its glass door taped with the words, "Under audit." The neighborhood changed fast after the verdict. No more warnings taped to doors. No more passive-aggressive letters about grass length or garbage bins. Instead, people actually talked to one another again. We shared tools, traded weekend barbecue invites, even laughed about how the cameras probably caught it all. I didn't brag about what I'd done. I didn't have to. The story spread on its own. The homeowner who turned the HOA's own surveillance against them. Some called it poetic justice. Others called it risky. For me, it was simple. You can only push a man so far before he pushes back. A few weeks later, I received an envelope from the county clerk's office, the results of the HOA audit. Inside was a summary of findings: misuse of funds, unreported income, unapproved surveillance expenditures. In other words, she'd buried herself long before I'd ever touched a camera. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it into a file labeled Resolution. That night, As the sun dipped below the rooftops, I sat on my porch sipping coffee and looked out over the neighborhood that had once felt like a prison. Now it was mine again. Quiet, free, human. The new Homeowners Committee had already started forming. Real neighbors, not enforcers. They'd asked if I wanted to join. I told them no. I'd done my part. Karen's obsession with control had ended exactly as it should, caught on camera, undone by her own paranoia. When people talk about justice, they often picture grand gestures, fiery speeches, or courtroom drama. But real justice? It's quieter than that. It's a still frame of truth, frozen in time, staring back at the people who thought they were untouchable. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the sound of silence taking its place. If this story taught me anything, it's that power built on control never lasts. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud, it's letting the truth do the talking. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below, because silence might be golden, but your voice keeps stories like this alive.